too, or just?
Yes, I'm going to start the Facebook feed right now.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep. Welcome, everybody. We're going to start in just a few minutes. Hey, if you want, drop us a line in the chat to tell us where you're tuning in from.
That's some nice light, Lindsey.
Oh, thanks. I'm using my camera as my webcam.
Yeah.
I popped the light up too.
Yeah, it's nice and even.
It is nice and even.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I've been trying to work out this light on Zoom meetings forever. I just gave up on it.
Listen, I've been helping a friend with their Zoom classes. So we came up with like a process. So I was like, well, if I'm using it for you, I can use it for myself. So
yeah. I just got like a 27.
Joe, do you want to utilize this chat thing or not?
Yeah, so we are going to be asking people to put questions in the Q&A box. I'll be watching the chat box. You can actually correspond to people in the audience, but make sure you change your drop down. Your default is at all panelists, so you want to change your drop down to all panelists and attendees if you want to speak to people in the audience.
Okay.
And wait a second. I think I shared the wrong screen.
Michael, is that picture copyrighted? I think your copyright watermark needs to be a little bigger, man.
Yeah. Maybe like right in the center.
Like you're missing so much space.
Yeah. You know?
I got them on all the photos that size, so
okay.
Last thing I want to do is piss off any photographers on the panel. Oh wait, where's Rashad?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Working? Probably.
Not
making money.
Let me see.
That coin.
Yeah.
You got his number, Sharice?
Yeah, I'm gonna text
I
him.
can text him too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Be like, where you at?
Right.
I mean, it is Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We're going to start here in just a minute.
You're gonna be like, oh, I totally forgot.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
It is.
So I got to tell you, the last email I saw.
He's there. No, is he? No. Okay.
The last time on the email I saw from this when I checked was 5:30.
Oh.
Oh, okay, yeah, 5:30 is good.
5:30 is when it ends.
And then I went through,
he would have been here right at the end.
I put that in my phone as 5:30, and then around 3 hours ago, I said, let me go to the site again and kind of go over this. It's like, what? 4? Oh.
Yeah, man, what's up? Okay.
All right. I'm assuming he got delayed, but I'm sure he'll join us, and we'll just seamlessly add him to the conversation. Let me know if you do hear from him, but I'm going to go ahead and get us started because I know we have a big panel and a lot to talk about. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joe Newman. I'm the founder of Focus on the Story, and this is our virtual photo festival that we've been running since April 1st, and this is the second to last show, and we saved perhaps the best for last. This is, we're going to talk about some deep stuff today. We're going to talk about some serious issues that this country's facing, and some of the spotlight that it's put on the people who are documenting that story. And we have some of the best doing that today, doing that right here with us. And my role today is basically to shut up and listen. But before I do that, I want to introduce our moderator. You know, I actually never met Dudley before today, but I did know him by reputation as a respected industry leader, as a mentor, and as a role model. Dudley Brooks is the Deputy Director of Photography for the Washington Post and photo editor for the Washington Post Photo Magazine. He's previously served as the photo director at Jet and Ebony magazines and was the Assistant Director of Photography at the Baltimore Sun. He was also an award-winning photojournalist at the Washington Post, where he worked from 1983 to 2005. During that time, he was also the co-creator of Songs of My People, African Americans, a self-portrait, a historically significant work that includes the work of 50 African American photojournalists that provides a window into the African American culture. Dudley, it's my pleasure and honor to have you here today. I'm going to turn my video off and hand the show to you.
Ooh, dangerous move, Joe. Dangerous move. Thanks to everybody. This is going to be a really good discussion. There's a lot that we need to talk about and that we can talk about. We might not even have time to do it all, which I'm sure of. But right now we're at a really important point in photojournalism, photography, and society in general. And all these things are going to intertwine, and they're going to continue to intertwine. So look forward to some really good questions and some really good conversation from our panelists. And so let me start with introducing the panelists. Layla?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I am Layla Ahmaud Arbery. I am a portrait and documentary photographer, born and raised in Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is where I am at, where I am now. I occasionally organize exhibitions, and I am the co-author of a book called Mfun, Women Photographers of the African Diaspora. It is the second book of photography produced by women photographers of African descent. The first one was Viewfinders by Jeannie Mutusumi Ash, published in 1986. Thank you.
Brent.
All right, my name is Brent Louis. I don't know where to start. Photo editor over at the New York Times. Also the co-founder of Diversify Photo, which is a website, database, and growing resource of 300, soon to be, I don't even know, 600-700 photographers who are people of color working around this globe right now to help diversify who are the people out there making the images that are recording history in moments like this and moments like this in general. Just because we've seen so much of history recorded from one angle. So time to mix that up. And I know myself, as my role as an editor, I always like working with people from different backgrounds and viewpoints. So let's keep mixing that up. So thank you so much for you all checking out, and let's get it on. It's gonna be great. I'm excited.
Charisse, you're up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charisse May, and I am a photographer, photojournalist in Washington, D.C. I also do portraiture work. I'm an adjunct professor at Howard University and president of Women Photojournalists of Washington, WPOW. Originally from Kansas City, Missouri, but I've called DC home for a while now. Thanks for having me.
Mike.
Hey, everybody. My name is Mike Mccoy. I am a photojournalist based in DC. I'm also a portrait photographer. I'm also a two-time Iraq veteran, and I gravitated to the camera as a way to cope with PTSD, and I found that photography allows me to use my camera as a tool to speak for the folks who are voiceless.
And is Joshua here?
He said he was coming in.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
He's right here.
Woo!
Hey.
What up?
Hey, Josh.
Hey. Hi, I'm Joshua Rashad McFadden. I'm originally from Rochester, New York. I was based in Atlanta for a very long time after school. And I'm pretty much known for my portraiture, but also kind of walking the borderline between documentary, journalism, and fine art photography.
Okay. Josh, was that your mobile office there you're in?
Yeah, like I had a shoot run over, and I'm in Alabama, so I'm an hour behind you all.
Oh, wow.
Always working. Always working.
Always working.
Right.
Lindsey.
Well, speaking of Alabama, because I'm from Birmingham, I'm Lindsey Witherspoon. I'm a commercial, editorial, and portrait photographer now based in Atlanta. I am a former public speaking instructor that decided to go full-time, go into photography full-time to do photography for marginalized communities and also learn more about the communities that are connected to me personally.
Everybody? Okay, good. So let's just dive in. The world blew up over the course of like past couple months. Well, actually with COVID started there, but then all of a sudden we have a legitimate uprising that is based on some very valid points and occurrences that Black folks and people of color have been talking about and complaining about and documenting for years. So I'm gonna just deal with the elephant in the room right now. I'm quite sure your phones have been blowing up. So all of a sudden, after a long time, Black photographers are sought after. There's a point of view that's needed. There is a body that's needed. And 2020 is a lot like from what I've heard stories of 1968, where there were so many photographers, reporters, TV reporters, producers who got their jobs because they were available and sought after to go into conflict situations. And again, they needed people that could talk to the folks who were at hand. And here we are again. So just give me an idea of like what it's been like for you the past couple of weeks. I know, Mike, I've dealt directly with you and Lindsey on a couple of things, but why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
Well, for me, it's been pretty emotional. We're dealing with COVID, and we're dealing with the death of unarmed Black people. And it seems like every time you turn the TV on, something new happens. And to go out there and photograph that as a photographer of color, I mean, it's deep, because we have to tell our stories, but at the same time, we're also putting ourselves in harm's way, because in order for us to get to our assignments, we have to get into our cars. And once you turn your key into the ignition, you become a target for the police. I don't want to be that next hashtag, but then once you get there, you still have to worry about the police. You have to worry about angry protesters. You have to worry about coronavirus. And then as you're seeing things, it begins to become a mirror, and it's a reflection of me. And I often say to myself, I could have been Freddie Gray. I could have been Alton Sterling. I could have been George Floyd. And it's pretty emotional. And sometimes, I have to laugh, in order not to cry. Like, for example, I was on Black Lives Matter Plaza, and I found this parking garage. And it was away from everyone. I can, file my images, take my mask off, and it was pretty cool. Then I also found out they had like free Wi-Fi so that I can get my stuff off without killing my battery. And I'll never forget Sam Cooke's song, "A Change Is Gonna Come." And as I'm filing my images, I just broke down crying, because it feels like 1968 again.
Lindsey, what about you?
I have to preface everything by saying this was my first time photographing a protest. So I didn't know what to look for or what was going to happen, once I was in that scene. And when the when the march started, you know, you have this incredible enthusiasm as to what we are marching for. So our tones are, you know, about justice and you know, no justice, no peace, all of the chants that you've heard. And as I'm walking back from the Georgia State Capitol, that's when you see people start dispersing to different areas of downtown Atlanta. And the moment that I got to the CNN Center, it was as if, you know, I was being morphed into another world. I'd never seen people so passionately angry about the same thing. So us feeling, you know, what we were feeling in that moment, and also, you know, being mindful of, you know, the police on this side, and you have protesters on this side, you have pepper spray being, you know, sprayed on folks, you see water bottles, and, you know, I'm literally standing there like, what the hell is going on? So to not only see it, but to feel it in that moment, it does something to you. And when I got home, I didn't know what to do, didn't know exactly what I felt at the moment. I knew what I saw, but I couldn't put words to it. And then as I started looking through my photos, I realized that this was something that it's going to be so historic that we can't ignore it at all. And even in this moment now that we've had since George Floyd, and of course being in Atlanta, we've had Rayshard Brooks, and also the reopening of Elijah McClain's case out of Colorado. It was something about this latest one that just brought me to tears, because you feel everything that's going on. And if you're an empath, and if you're a photographer, and especially a human, you feel every single moment of what's going on. You can go back to the photos that you took weeks ago, and there's going to be another type of emotion that comes out of it. So, you know, to keep my part brief, I'm tired, but yet I know that what we are creating right now is going to affect some type of change. I feel it, and I know we say this every time something like this happens, but we are definitely going to be in a space where we see not only the social world change, but our photography world change as well.
Yeah. So Layla, so to Lindsey's point, how did you separate, or did you separate the emotional aspect of this is a personal situation for you, because it includes all of us, it affects all of us? How did you maintain that focus to do the work that you did, or did you use that as something that helped you with your interpretation?
Okay, so there's a lot to say. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for, thank you for being here. I really want to acknowledge a photographer named Patience Zelenga. She is based in the Twin Cities. She's a young Nigerian sister, and she's been dedicated to telling the stories of the uprisings and the activism in the Twin Cities. And I just wanted to bring her name into the conversation, because the story in Minnesota and Minneapolis has been very close to her, and I hadn't seen her work in the coverage that was going around. So I just wanted to acknowledge her as someone who has been doing the work before anyone even landed in Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. So this is personal for me. This is very personal. I didn't separate it. I'm from New York. I went to Minneapolis to do some storytelling. I didn't have an assignment, but it felt very new to me. It felt very recent to me, because I was just in Minneapolis in February doing some documentarian work with the students at the Gordon Parks High School. So I was just there, and then Gordon Parks' niece, Robin Hickman, reached out to me, and she showed me some pictures of the Gordon Parks High School, which had been set on fire. So that's when I was just like, well, I got to get out there. My brother, Russell Frederick, gave me a call, and he was thinking the same thing. So we went out there. But when I got out there, I was very much interested in some of the slower stories, some of the more personal stories. And the reason because of that is when I was younger, I witnessed the Crown Heights riots, so in the 80s, right? And so witnessing all of that and knowing how that came about, and that night watching the playback on the TV of what, you know, the media's interpretation of what this was, I was thinking about how media affects communities that are in the midst of uprising. So I didn't necessarily cover the protest, but I wanted to engage with some of the community members and just try to involve them and engage and try to get a sense of what needed to be represented. So I did a lot of portraiture work. I was in conversation with some of the activists and people who were supporting the individuals who were out on the streets uprising and being present in that kind of way. So that's the way I showed up in this situation, you know.
Therese, how about you?
I think just to go back on something that Lindsey said in terms of, and Layla touched on it too, in terms of not separating yourself, because, you know, without the badge, without any of this, I'm a Black woman. So that's with me no matter, you know, what I'm doing, what story I'm telling. And I feel like there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of emotion to it, because you feel everything that's happening out there because you're connected to yourself. You have the same stories. You feel what you're seeing. At the same time, even though it's so emotional and hard, I feel a responsibility to tell the story. So I felt like even though, you know, I would come home and cry and try to separate myself, and I'm crying now, I'm getting emotional, I still need to tell the story.
So Joshua, you're mainly a visual artist. I mean, would you classify yourself as that more so fine art?
Yes. I classify myself.
I'm looking at your photographs, and you dug in, and it looks like that you kind of just went for raw emotion on a lot of your things. Where'd that come from?
Well, again, thanks for you know, having this conversation. And I was actually in Minneapolis with Layla, and we met up at one point, you know, at a certain point. And so that was encouraging to see. I also left from Rochester, New York, I think before the second day of unrest in Minneapolis. I felt like I needed to go. I didn't go on assignment. I wasn't on assignment initially. You know, I've been photographing, you know, protest at least since 2013, you know, after Trayvon Martin was murdered. And so I don't think, you know, that process, you know, the process isn't new for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think what came out of it this time was new. Whether it be, you know, mostly the new attention to the work. And so as far as emotion goes, no, I never tried to separate emotion because I'm, you know, photographing my community. I'm a part of this community. I identify with everyone that I photograph, and I identify with the pain and sorrow and the hurt that everybody is feeling and was feeling at the time in Minneapolis. And so when I arrived, you know, I was led by my emotion. And I think that's important for all of us, you know, as artists, as photographers, not to separate, because then, you know, if you're saying you're separating emotion, you're almost you're trying to separate, you know, that empathy, that ability to identify with these human beings that have been either killed or have been impacted by these police killings. And so I feel a sense of responsibility to live within that emotion and create the work inside of that emotion. And I think that's why people connect with these photographs in a different kind of way, and why people connect with all of our photographs that's in this conversation in a different way. And you saw it immediately. You saw people begin to share the images, share their experiences, whether we're on the ground and people come up and say, you know, who are you photographing for, or are you from here? Hearing the stories of people that lived, you know, 5 houses down from where George Floyd was murdered. And, you know, there was one woman who said, you know, I don't want to sleep. I don't want to be comfortable. I don't want people to be comfortable. You know, I don't want my neighborhood to be quiet. I want to hear his name being chanted over and over again. You know, getting those stories and feeling that it's overwhelming. You know, it's overwhelming, and trying to, I guess, process that while still making work, while making an edit, while sending them to whomever, it's pretty difficult. It's difficult to know that some people in, you know, this country and in the world will consume these images in another type of way because they don't identify and they don't have that same emotion that we may feel when photographing these types of situations.
Hey, Brent, so what did you see Brent and I are on the other end of the spectrum here as picture editors. What did you see in the edit or the body of work that was coming across your desk? I mean, what did you notice that was really distinctive as far as this demonstration as opposed to some of the other ones that you had to deal with? But just, you know, the type of work that you saw coming out in terms of power. Brent, you out there?
He's muted. Brent, you're muted.
I'm muted. I'm back. All right, okay. Cool. I was gonna restart it anyway because I didn't like the way I went into it. But no, it's funny because I want to say the first day or so I didn't look at work. I just didn't. For me, I'm still gonna say young Black man in America. Just had a birthday, so I'm getting up. But as a young Black man in America, like I remember where I was. I can tell you where I was when the verdict came down for Straight Bond. I can tell you where I was when I saw the videos of Philando and Alton. I can tell you where I was for all of those. So like this one, I mentally knew that this one was directed at us. I knew it was going to have a whole different level of power than some of the other previous ones, just because of everything going on. So when I actually did finally hop in, which was like day 3 right after I think things kicked up in Chicago, it was just this sense of urgency. It was a sense of frustration, like overrunning frustration, and just this raw emotion that I don't think I've seen before. I don't think that going through the photos of seeing like even Minneapolis back in 2016, that same level wasn't there. This was just all out. It was just raw. It was just passion, and people were fed up. I think, you know, once you start reading the pictures a little bit more, and you start to understand exactly where we are in this moment. Like for me, it took on this other layer that like people took to the streets in a moment like this, in the middle of a global pandemic, to let their voices heard, and it just took it to a whole other level, because I feel like America and the world as a whole understood that being Black in America, dealing with the police, dealing with systemic racism is way more deadlier than a global pandemic can ever be to a Black person. So looking through these photos, you start to get that sense. And sadly enough, the earlier images that I remember seeing coming across wires and actually coming into our feeds, I'm not gonna throw shade at anyone, were like coming from like white photographers originally. Those are the ones that are being pushed out in the news outlets early on. But I feel like once I got to a different level of looking at the images coming from Instagram, following the photographers that are on the ground, following everyone that's on this call, you can start to see that compassion. You can start to see that other layer of understanding, those nuances that you were missing from, I guess, the main media sources at that time. They caught up. They definitely caught up. It took a little while, but they got there. And it just brought it home in a way that I have never seen. And it just tugged at me. I remember seeing the photos from Minneapolis on the night the police station burned. And just knowing that that's called frustration. That's the anger. And I remember going over to my son's bed and just hugging him. He was asleep. He was gone. And just hugging him and just telling him I love him. And I hope that this world, okay, I'm not start crying. This world becomes a better place for him. So the gravity of these photos that were coming across from Black photographers and photographers in general, it was just pushing it to the level of having the conversations that we need to have. So.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I noticed was, I mean, you had people that, for all practical purpose, risked their lives to go out and, one, be a part of this movement, but then to two, go out and document it, which is a special type of bravery. Where do you think this needs to go? The story needs to go next. And this is for anybody who wants to answer out of the group. But we've gotten through the initial aspect of the reactionary part of it. How do we dig deeper now, and where do we take it from this point? Because I think it's up to us to actually kind of like lead that charge. So where do you think it needs to go next?
Okay, go ahead, Sharice.
Okay. I think there are a lot of kind of sub stories that are connected to what's going on and what was done with the uprisings and the unrest that was going on. I know one of the things personally for me, I started to look at the next generation, the youth. And so I think that was like an important story, and there's more stories, you know, with that in terms of kind of like passing the torch from the older generation to the next generation. And what are they thinking now? What difficult conversations are parents having with their kids about this? How are the kids processing it? Are they understanding, you know, the magnitude of what's happening, or, you know, what's going on? I think in kids, the youth are smarter than people give them credit for. And just talking to some of them, they really have like an understanding of what's going on and what needs to be done. And one thing I can say, like with the younger people who are out there, a lot of them are taking the lead. So I think those stories of this younger generation coming up who have become, you know, the next leaders in the community, and they're putting in a lot of work. They're organized. They have an agenda. They know what they want. And they organize really quickly, because I spoke to one group, and they had just started like a couple weeks ago, and they already had like so much support on the ground, and they were doing a lot in DC. So I think you have those stories in terms of what is this next generation? What does this look like? So all this that people have been, you know, out there in the street protesting and crying out for help. Are there things that are turning? What things are happening because of this? For me, I do a lot of political work as well. So I think an important story as well is, how is this affecting legislation? What's going on there? What's going on the Hill because of what's going on in the street?
Anybody else?
I think, you know, to speak to what Brent was saying, we do need to look at the nuance, right? So how did we get here in the first place? When I was in Minneapolis and St. Paul, I'm sorry for the noise, and speaking to activists, you know, residents, and just my overall conversation with regards to the Minneapolis Police Department, there were so many cases of unarmed people, and specifically people dealing with mental illnesses who had been harmed and killed by the police. You know, so you have all of these different stories that we don't get to hear about that result in the uprisings that we saw. And also to speak to what Cherie said, you know, I'm very inspired by the youth. I met with some of the teen activists in the Twin Cities who have been very vocal and active in organizing. And one of the events that I did go to was on the St. Paul State Capitol. It was a sit-in, extremely organized and literally organized and put together by high school students and maybe some college freshmen in college. So I think that, you know, getting to the all of the nuances of what all of the problems that we are having with race and structural racism in this country, those stories need to be unearthed and put on the table and discussed and examined, you know, alongside with the huge issue of the violent idea of white supremacy. So all of those things need to be on the table and discussed and examined in very nuanced ways.
There's a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Lindsey, go ahead.
Oh, no, what I just want to say quickly that I think the personal projects that most of us already have are probably dealing with what we're going, you know, this current uprising now. And how can we, I don't want to say restructure, but how can we look at those old projects and see how the current uprising will affect how we viewed it then and look at how it will look in the future. So, you know, having this updated view of, and this updated conversation around systemic racism and white supremacy, and look how that affected the group of people that we were already photographing, which was mostly our own.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a question in the chat room where I used the term legitimate uprising. Was this a legitimate uprising? In your definition of legitimacy?
Yeah. You know, like we've been going through this for 400 years. I mean, this was never a problem until it started being televised, broadcasted, and until it started getting the response from white America. You know, before white America, they had no idea, they had no clue. Do I think this is a good thing? I do. Hopefully it brings, you know, more attention and hopefully we can start having these conversations. And these conversations are going to be hard and nobody wants to have them. But you're not going to see change until you have those uncomfortable conversations. And, you know, those conversations go across multiple industries and platforms. You know, for instance, the photojournalism community, you know, the education community, you know. But, you know, overall, I think it's going to be a process. And if we're going to get through this, we got to work together. And we have to have tough skin. And we have to be willing to talk, you know. And that's the purpose of having this talk today, to start this conversation. You know, I don't expect for it to, you know, fix itself in a day, but this is going to be an ongoing process and we need both parties to come together and work this out.
Joshua, Brent, you have anything to say? Because I think the legitimacy is valid. And I think that an uprising happens in several stages. So yeah, you have the initial reaction to it, but an uprising is about change. How do you, either one of you feel about that?
Well, I guess I think I was misunderstanding the question.
Well,
So was the reaction to George Floyd's death?
No, I'll read you the question. I'll read you the question. So the question is, Mr. Brooks kicked this off with reference to a legitimate uprising. Would he please explain, elaborate? Also, are we witnessing a war in America? Not just the current street clashes, the rubber bullets and such, but the overarching clashes. The police brutality, the police killings, false arrests, prison overcrowding and such. Is this indeed a legitimate war? I mean, I have an answer to that, but I'd like to have you all address.
Well, you know, these things that are happening, you know, it's not new. It's not new at all. I think that's all I have to say about that.
I mean,
so,
yeah. Sorry, I'm kind of taken aback by that question. You know, are lynchings legitimate? Are redlining, state-sanctioned murder, are those things legitimate? I mean, what are motivating those horrific actions? You know, why is the question on citizens in the street trying to push back against a system that is really trying to kill them and destroy them? You know, so let's talk about the legitimacy of the systemic racism that we've been facing for so long, you know, since ages. I feel like I can go back to Black people in Haiti or in Brazil, go have a conversation with Queen Nanny and talk about the same thing. We're basically fighting the same thing. Stephen Biko, the same thing, same fight. We could sit down and talk about the same thing because it's been ongoing, you know. So is colonialism legitimate? Like I don't know. That question is that's a wild question. Let me mute myself.
Yeah, that's a wild. Okay.
Yeah.
So
no,
I agree. Can I say something? I think I agree. I think that question just needs to be rephrased. But I think even with the question prior to, I think the issue really is that the energy is not kept on the issue at hand, the real issue of racism in America. It always gets flipped to how can we progress as Black people. We're not progressing here. We're not the ones that need to be pushed to progress.
Right.
The thing is, America, you know, needs to progress as far as white America, right? You know, rolling back those ideas of those racist ideas. That's where the energy needs to stay, not on whether or not the reaction to systemic racism is legitimate. I mean, that's not. If I'm understanding the question, I think that's how that was phrased. So, you know, I think with people continuing to question the reaction to police killings or the reaction to overcrowded prisons or the reaction to anything that is a result of systemic racism, to continue to question those reactions, the reactions by oppressed communities, is, you know, that's just a trick. You know, let's keep the energy on the issue at hand, which is racist institutions, the racist institution of photography. Why images are continuously suppressed, right? We say, okay, how do we move forward from the images that we're making? We've been making these images. We've been making these images. Like I think Lindsey said, yeah, our personal projects continue to talk about racism, but they're only celebrated or shown during times of uprising.
Yes.
And then they go back to being suppressed. They're not exhibited. They're not published. They're not widely disseminated like they are during these times. And that's not because we're not making the work. That's not because we're not making the work. It's because there is a system that continues to suppress those images. So let's continue to question that, not whether or not we're going to continue to make the work, because we do. Right. For years.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's the class.
Going from like the what you said, Joshua, as far as like institutionalized, like thinking about even when this might be touching on something completely offhand, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Even going to the portfolio reviews and being asked as Black photographers to have diversity within what we already shoot, and that's not asked of everybody. And if that's what if I am comfortable, and if I know the people or the subject or the group of people I'm photographing, what does diversity matter? This is a story just like it is anywhere else. So as Josh was saying, and as all of us have been saying, you know, the work we've always been doing is what you see now. It's nothing different than what you've been seeing. It's just that now that we are being pushed to the forefront, you're forced to see. You have no choice. You have to acknowledge that you, or, you know, as a white photographer or whatever your race may be, that you have the gaze, the white gaze that you have put into this world is how it affects all of us in general. So I'm just gonna end at that.
I see Brent's nodding his head here, like he's been nodding it. So,
well, Dudley, can I?
Then Sheree, I'll get. Okay, go ahead, Sheree, go ahead.
Just off of what Joshua was just saying, and Lindsey as well. All of this is connected. The unrest, the uprisings that are happening out there is the same thing that goes on within our industry. And it's been a thing of, you have people who feel invisible. The work is being done, just like Joshua said, the work continues to be done, but it's like now a thing of people are seeing the work now. And it's like, oh my God, like this is really great. This is it. But the work has been done. Like it has continued to be done. And a lot of times we self-assign. Like I heard Layla and Joshua who said they went out without, they didn't have an assignment, but they went to Minneapolis. They felt like, I need to go out here, I need to tell this story. And that's a lot of times I feel like what happens with Black photographers is we go out and we self-assign, we see a story, we see something and say, okay, that story needs to be told. It's not being told over here, it's not being told over there. So I'm just gonna go tell the story. Now, whether that gets published or not, a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times it just remains like a personal story. A lot of times it's, on our websites or in social media, things like that. And where you have the same group of people who are out doing these assignments. So now what's changed is this whole movement of hire Black photographers, this new energy of like seeing Black photographers and seeing their work and amplifying our voices. That's what's different now. And that has, as Lindsey said, it's like now in your face, like, here are these photographers' work. It's like right there. You can't help but see it.
Yeah, but see, I want to make sure that this is sustainable. Because this does not need to be a flash in the pan, call them when you need them kind of thing, and then not call them again after that on something else non-related to Black social issues. So Brent, you've been nodding your head for like the past few minutes. I want to get you in on this, but then I also have another question for you that came across the chat room too.
Okay, what's going on? Oh, let me knock this one out first. All right, so let's start here. So fact of the matter is, like everyone, I'm just nodding my head because Giles is preaching. We're going to church right now. But overall, like the situation is indicative of everything you all touched on. So the idea of this industry in general, that's sitting around like, oh, how did we get here? Or why is this all this frustration? Where's all the work at? If we only knew this beforehand, we could get in front of it. And it's like the work's being done. Editors like myself and other photographers have been pitching these stories to folks, to news outlets for years, for eons, and everyone's like, I don't really see it. It's until someone becomes a hashtag that, like the story of a Black person being killed by the police, or the ideal of neighborhood gentrification becomes a thing. Then it was like, oh, okay, so now we have the time for the story. But like 3 months before, it's like, oh, that doesn't really matter. It's fine. It's about Black people. This is what it is. And so that for me drives me insane to just know, like, understanding where I came from, South Side Chicago, South Side worldwide. But it's just the idea that like these stories matter, and it just don't matter in Black History Month or in a moment like this. They matter year round. So it shows so much. And we're going to get real for a second. Like, well, first, I've been doing this work to make sure that photographers of color, Black photographers especially, work are being highlighted. These stories are being looked at. These stories are being used. And just the amount of energy that now like randomly rushed to it because this is going on blows me away. Just because like I've been preaching to editors, I've been preaching to the gatekeepers to actually like look at the work, and they haven't made those connections. They haven't built those relationships. I should ask Joshua, because you're going back to this over and over again, but when he went out to Minneapolis, he hit me up. He's like, Brent, do you know anybody who's looking for the work? I'm out here, I'm doing this great work. And immediately I was like, all right, cool, let me see what I can start doing. If people were actually doing the work beforehand, they would have seen Joshua's Instagram. They would have seen the work that he was doing from the jump. So there wouldn't be like a rush. So I would have had Joshua on a day rate, on assignment, on a rolling assignment, much further before he even touched down. He could have even made that call to be like, hey, blah, 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 the national desk. I'm heading down to Minneapolis. I'm going to be out there. Let's do this. Cool. Bam. So it shows you this sense of structural, like, systematic racism in so many ways, and it's just mind-blowing how this industry that is made up of so many liberal-minded people just can't wrap this around their brains. That this is not Black History Month. These are stories that are real and urgent, and we want to tell them. They need to be told, and let's not wait until someone else becomes the next hashtag or people take to the streets to tell them even further. Like, let's just do this like we do everything else. When the new ice cream shop opens in town, the same way you use that same energy to talk about that story and how, like, this one area is like, oh, we got a new coffee shop. Use the same issue to tell about how something else close in that neighborhood. I don't know, did you lose Belly? But, oh, you're back. Okay. I feel like we lost somebody. All right, so, but what's the second question? I went a little off.
Second question, so somebody tossed us in here. This is an important point, and this is something that we've always felt. What is it that Black photographers bring to the table, storytelling-wise, specifically about Black people in general, whether they be African Americans, whether they be African, whether they be Caribbean or wherever? Is there something specific that we bring to the table that you will not get anyplace else? And what do you feel that is?
So for me, it's always come down to, like, it's this sense of nuance and it's a sense of understanding and a sense of being able to connect. It's like the shared experience that Black photographers bring when doing stories about Black folks. It's just one of those things. For me, I always like to go back to the ideal of someone being parachuted into an area where they don't fully understand. And, like, you're gonna get some, you're gonna get those ideals of, like, for me, I always go back to oh God, Nightmare Before Christmas. I was like, oh, what's this? There's so much to explore. Ooh, what's this? And there's a difference from someone that understands that community so much more and what they can bring to it. It's not new to them. They're just telling the stories because they lived it. This is their lived experience. Even if they aren't from that area specifically, being Black in America brings something else to the table. So it just brings that further understanding and further how things come out and what specific to look for. What are the ideals? What are the strings that need to be pulled on? And this level of compassion that you don't see. Like, I've seen these conflict and war photographers being popped into Minneapolis, and it's basically looks like bulls on parade right there. Like, it's just chaos and craziness, and it's like, no, it's this compassion that is missing that's driving me crazy because I'm not able to see it, and it's not. The photos that I saw coming from many organizations was not indicative of that. And I think that's what you miss when you don't have that understanding of why people are putting their lives at risk, why people want to hear their voices, and the 400 years of not being able, honestly, to be seen and be heard in a way that needs to matter, that honestly matters. I mean, yeah, actually, if you want to go fully back, I feel like the last time we've had Black voices and Black images being shown the way like this was 64, was 68. Which is absurd if you think about that in, like, overall terms. It's almost 50 years since we've actually had a moment like this. So yeah, it's just this nuance that you just can't fake. You just can't read books. You can't read Kendi and understand. Like, you just can't read all about Malcolm X and, like, I got this. I understand what Black folks go through. Like, it's just this layer of compassion and nuance that you just can't get.
And it's a commonality. When we did Songs of My People, this goes back 25 years. And the intent that we had was to photograph normalcy within Black folks. I mean, we do have a normal. We're not always in stress. We're not always in dire circumstances. I mean, we have lives that we live normally. And the intent was that you could take any one of those pictures and you could put any other racist picture in there and it would be the exact same picture. It would have the same emotions. It would have the same nuances. It would have the same pull on your heart or on your sensibilities, because it's just a good picture of a situation where people are being human, And I was talking with a friend of mine, Mark Gale and I got into business together a long time ago. Yeah, right. And we tried to come up with, which I'm going to continue this, a list of photo editors within the industry, newspaper and magazine, that are either Black specifically or of color, but I want to deal with Black specifically. We couldn't get through two hands, So how do we, as a group of artists, charge the gatekeepers and make them pay attention to this? And do you think that this moment, where all of you have been out there covering this and worked on this, is going to be the kickoff point to make that happen? And then how do we keep that momentum going? That's for anybody.
I honestly think that there has to be the notion of creating more Black photo editors. And also letting folks know that that is a career option. It is just as important as the photographer.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have someone that, you know, understands the importance of the stories that you actually want to pitch, then that I don't want to say it makes it easier, but it makes it a bit more, you feel comfortable pitching these stories, because the nuances, the changes, the timbre, the tone, and everything that you know about the story or the culture, even about yourself and even about yourself and the stories that you've already photographed, you don't want to have to do too much heavy lifting to explain what it means. This is what it is. This is who we are. This is what I want to shoot. You say yes or no. But all in all, cultivating that next wave of Black photo editors, Black photo designers, next, you know, big group of Black creatives that understand what the intention of the story is, that's gonna, to me, I don't know about anybody else, but to me, I think that is like the crucial change that needs to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely, I think we need more Black photo editors in there. Also, I just want to make sure too that it's not a thing of, yes, we can tell those stories, Black stories in our community, our culture, but we can also add our voice to other stories outside of Black community, Black culture. And I think that adds another layer of richness and an opportunity to tell some of those stories in a different way and to look at it with a different lens, a different eye. So all this energy that's going on now with Black photographers being hired for assignments to cover what's going on now, I just want that energy. I want it to continue beyond this moment and to go forward beyond what's going on now. When everyone's emotions have calmed down, you don't have the vision of seeing George Floyd murdered, or, you know, you don't have protest or anything. When everything is quiet and people go back to their like regular normal lives, I just don't want it to go back to business as usual. And that we continue the discussions that we're having today, the discussions that we're having now in this moment, that it brings forth change beyond this moment.
Yeah, no more lip service. Like, do it. Don't just, you know, make these promises, these empty promises. And as Cherise said, like, the stories, we're so diverse in our own that we can pretty much shoot whatever or photograph whatever that you may assign us. So don't pigeonhole us to, you know, certain styles of stories, because we're capable of all things that you may hand to us.
Yeah, and it always comes back to the idea of like, editors are like looking for Black photographers to do a certain thing, and it's like, that's not how it's supposed to work, because you don't just look for white photographers to photograph white people. Like, you know, only white people can photograph white people because they just don't have the skin tone work. And anything in general, like hiring more Black photographers, you give so much more like variety, you get some more scale, you get much more understanding. And so at the end of the day, like, I really hope we don't lose this energy. I'm going to be very optimistic. I'm not going to take my internal fears, but like, I hope we don't lose this energy, and I hope that because of this, there are going to be those relationships built. There's going to be the understanding that, like, Lindsey can do just about anything. Cherise can do anything. Joshua can do anything. Michael can do anything. Layla can do anything, because they can do anything when it comes to whatever the story might just be at the end of the day. So I am hoping that the editors, gatekeepers, folks in charge of hiring are going to come away with that, are going to come away with the understanding. It's like, oh, wait, they're people. And they're damn good photographers. Look at that. Look at them doing anything and everything they want to do because they damn good. Like, and so I just hope that we come away with relationships built in new contexts. And I hope that the phones keep ringing. And it doesn't have to do with putting yourself at like risk for having to go out in the middle of COVID-19 to cover protests that are already spiking and going crazy. But when it comes to that portrait that you got, because, you know, putting together Versailles, folks do a lot of amazing portrait work, and there's some amazing portraiture out there. And I mean, you know, guilty as charged. Newspapers right now, we do a lot of portrait work. Listen to these folks; they're brilliant. Mm-hmm. So,
do you all feel like there's an asterisk beside your name? So what I mean by that is, and this can happen when you're on assignment or when you're talking about going on assignment or somebody's calling you, that, well, they're good, but, you know, for this particular thing, I'm not quite sure whether they're the right fit, or, you know, well, you know, she's really good, but, you know, I've never, you know, judging up against this person over here, I don't think they quite have it. How often do you experience that? And Brent, this is even for you as an editor and the other photographers too.
I feel it a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I feel it every day. You know, before this happened, I felt like I would only get calls for, like, you know, Black stories. I would do white stories too, but when I was doing a Black story, I felt like my editors had more faith and trust in my creative direction. But when I would do white stories, I felt like I would always receive, you know, extra, like, I don't want to say criticism, but I felt like they were coaching me into, like, how to photograph a white subject. And it gets even deeper. Like, for example, you know, covering stuff on Capitol Hill, you know, there's no diversity whatsoever. You know, the only Black people I would see on the Hill would be Sharice, Jamel Contees, and you may see Roy Lewis every now and then. And, you know, no one speaks to you. You know, you don't exist. And I mean, I'm sorry, I had to turn my camera off because the light's getting bad and I'm getting kind of emotional. But I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say that's how it is, but I hope this changes.
Yeah, I definitely feel the asterisk. You know, I've gotten well, I'll call you when I have something I feel fits you. So, I mean, that's been vocally said. So it's definitely there. It's definitely, I think, a part of it. When you look at Black photographers sometimes, is that kind of pigeonhole, you know, well, maybe, you know, they can do this job, but maybe not this one. But my thing is, everybody had to start somewhere. So even those who are at the top of their game right now, who get, like, you know, tons of work, you know, they're here and there and everywhere, they weren't always there. They had to get assignments and work, and they continue to grow, you know, in what they're doing. So that whole thing of, well, maybe they're not ready or they don't fit this, you know, I think is a weak excuse, really.
So Joe wants to jump in and do Q&A, I think, at this point, and open it up to everybody who's listening. So
yeah,
come on in.
Thanks a lot. Got a lot of great questions in there. I'm gonna call on. Well, he's no longer on there. Andre Chung is left, but his question was. I'll read it. Something I noticed is where the focus is white photographers consistently focused on white allies who joined the movement. We focused on ourselves and reported
He's
a wide.
there.
What's that?
He's just
Andre's back. He said, I'm here. Back.
He might be muted.
Let me see. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me get him. Andre, I've allowed you to unmute your microphone. Go ahead and talk.
Hey, yeah. Hey, everybody, how y'all doing?
Good.
What up, Dre?
Good. Hey, what's up? Hey, one of the things I was kind of seeing was that, you know, as I looked at the work, a lot of the white photographers would focus on all the white allies that have come in, and, you know, us as Black photographers I could see it in our work that we were focusing on us, and I think that there's something about making sure that we still have agency, you know. You know, I want to make sure that one of the things that's important for us as Black photographers is to make sure that we're properly represented, obviously, But I wonder whether or not editors, are really thinking about this. And I'm going to kind of put this to the two editors on the panel, like, what kind of conversations are you having with your colleagues? And is this going to be a lasting relationship? I think it lands right at the point where we were in this discussion, so to the editors.
All right.
Yeah, you can go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Let's see, I'm trying to see how to put this in the most politically correct way, but those conversations were not happening. I think across newsrooms in general, I can honestly speak for the Times, but it's those conversations were not happening at first, and you can see that. You can see it because of who are people doing the coverage when everything first went, when everything first broke, when the news got big and everyone was looking at Minneapolis. Who were the people on the ground for us doing the coverage? They were not having those conversations. Those conversations were not being had. I don't think that understanding was even clicking for folks about why this was important and where the direction was going, and actually at the end of the day, like, what was kind of important to come out of this in the coverage, and how we should be guiding the photographers who are telling the story. Because even at the end of the day, like, even if you went off and you got a load full of white people to tell the story, at least you can kind of sway that guidance to be like, hey, you know what? This is the focus. You're bringing back a lot of these allies, and I'm thankful for seeing all the white folks that came out, but like, let's really pivot back to understanding that this is a Black story. This is a story about how frustrations in the African American community have boiled over and has led us to this, and we need to understand that. But I can tell you from the inside track, from a seat at the table, like, those conversations were not happening and didn't fully happen till a week or two later. Till we got to the point where things were almost at the point of like calming down from the craziness, but going more of a stage, more of a countrywide, actually globally. When it got to that point, then we were like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. We should totally diversify and understand. Now we get why we need to hire black folks to tell the story. We get it now, but it wasn't immediately, which was, it hurt to see.
Yeah. I mean, I'll reference I did Addis Festival a couple of years back, and I did something like this with African photographers on the continent, and I basically told them, they asked me the question about getting jobs, getting us more assignments worldwide, and some of these folks are not even necessarily photojournalists, but they might be fine art photographers or more interpretive photographers, and I said, look, they're not looking for you. I mean, white editors are not looking for you, not even to cover where you live. The majority of them would prefer to parachute in somebody from Paris or Italy or, white dude from the States or whatever else, instead of actually going through the process of saying, is there somebody else out? Maybe I should get somebody who's actually from Lagos to cover Lagos, photographer who actually lives there, and get that perspective. I think that's an important perspective for this story. It's not happening with African photographers, and it's really not happening with African American photographers here. I don't want to say that we're invisible. I'm not going to take it to that extent, because I don't think that's the case. There have been many of us who have made a mark and have gotten through, but it's not like a conscious thing where picture editors will say, oh, let me look for a different voice, simply because I should look for a different voice. Mm-hmm. This person does this, oh, this person's shot for me before, I love their work, they've always delivered, but they don't really take, I don't think, as much time as they need to kind of look at the nuances of what somebody else who doesn't look like their favorites will bring to the table. And it's not even just photography, it happens with wordside too. Black writers have a similar challenge. And I think what this moment, I don't even want to say hopefully, because I think it's a thing where we have to ensure that it does, is to keep these voices that they have now discovered, despite the fact that these folks have been shooting years and years and years and putting out great work, keep this momentum going. And it's really going to be up to all of us to push that from various levels. And the levels are from me and Brent as editors. It's going to be from photographers pitching constantly. I call Mike Mccoy the poster child for persistence on he should have a sign around his neck,
Yes.
And what he did and with me as an editor was, he just wouldn't go away until, and I'm like, well, I don't know this guy. I haven't met this guy. Then I met him and I'm like, oh, he still doesn't go away, and at some point, and I respect him for that, and I love him for that. And because at some point, you will send a pitch out that will hit an editor's desk at the right time when they are looking for something or somebody that you just suggested a story about. And then that starts the ball rolling. Because most editors are kind of somewhat creatures of habit. They have their little cadre of people who they like, and they use them consistently. But I think it's at a point where we all have to encourage the middle editors. A lot of times it's the middle editors who do the majority of the assigning, to know you have to pay attention to this body of work and you have to pay attention to this perspective. And you got a taste of it now, so let's keep it going.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead, Layla.
Oh, okay, yeah. I just wanted to talk to a little bit about the experiences that I've had with editors, and just through conversations, there is a hesitancy. There's some hesitancy with hiring Black photographers. I think that it's an issue of what we have been, what we believe, what we have internalized. There's sometimes an issue of trust. Can we trust you to tell the story? And then also there's a big issue of your skills being questioned. And so what has come up for me is an issue of, can you reproduce this very specific kind of aesthetic? Can you continue in this style that is present in the canon, which is like largely white male? So it's like this very narrow way that the photo community is committed to understanding photography, and no wiggle room. And I'm not talking about skill, I'm talking about just different perspectives and perhaps creativity that we should embrace, and also, really looking at internalized racism too, because that's an issue for all of us as well. And I feel like we should always be present and thinking about the ideas that we believe as ourselves as Black people when we are dealing with each other in the industry.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now, let me follow up on that one more really quickly. Just in the conversations I've had recently, the idea that skills and equipment and all the things that kind of go into it that actually we really dive into it cost money, which goes to systematic racism, oppressing Black folks in general, but that's whatever. But editors see Black photographers and they're like, oh, I don't know if they have the gear, do they have a 7200 that they need to go out there and capture that assignment, or can they file on deadline? Do they even know what FCP is? Do they know how to write capture information? All of these things are gates and roadblocks that people like to put in, and also not work to go forward. Because they're like, well, if you want to work for me, you should already kind of know this stuff, when it's like, you don't. Some people just don't know and just need that help, that push. And as an editor, that's our role. That is our role, to make sure that people I work with who might have the aesthetic approach that I love can also do the back end that they need. And whatever they don't need, I want to be part of the process to make sure they get that, so that the next time that they do an assignment, that they're golden. They know exactly how this works. They have what they need to go forward. And then also just let them know, because a lot of folks have not gone through the journal pipelines of the legacy schools of photojournalism or the editorial world. So they can use just that little bit of leg up. And I feel like as editors, we need to do that. We need to push that, because for me, I love working with people who have not been seen in the publications that I'm working with, that I'm working for. end up listing those voices and get them to the next level. So like when they become I think my post job's Miranda Barnes. So when they become Miranda Barnes and they're like, hey, I can't take this assignment for you. I gotta go to China for time. I catch you in like 3 weeks. I love that. Sometimes, on deadline makes me a little upset, but like, I love that. And that's what I feel like so much of this industry is not doing when it comes to Black photographers, is building our relationship and pushing people forward and giving them the information that they need to succeed always.
Right.
Yeah, let me jump in on something. Let me jump on something real quick. I got to put my deputy hat on. But to the photographers, you have got to bring it.
Yeah.
Right. The picture that you thought was good on Wednesday doesn't count on Thursday. And so and I'll say for us as photographers, because I still consider myself a photographer, but to photographers, it's got to be a never-ending mission to continuously get better at what you do, because the competition is so steep. And if we're dealing with the photojournalism world, it's radically vicious in that. But when the magazine world, it is even more so, because it's fewer people that they're looking at. And so I always try to encourage photographers. I talk to a lot of photographers about this, and about how to push their work forward. It's got to be a mission where you are going to continuously get better at whatever it is that you do and add more skills to the table. If you are a photographer that does a lot of assignments where you have to light, basic lighting is one thing, but now let's figure out how to do more advanced lighting. How do you increase your technique to where it's pristine? Educate yourselves on post-production, on building a team of people around you, assistants. Learn what all those parts are, because that's only going to actually help you get the higher paying gigs, and also be more consistent with your approach to what it is that you produce. So I just wanted to say that too. I mean, some of the onus is on all of us to continuously push our work forward. Right. And a lot of times you have to push it forward without a lot of help. It just has to be something that you're innately going to do until you get that help.
Right. And what I wanted to say was just, educating yourself, not only behind the skill, because of course that's important, but also behind the business that you have, because essentially as a creative, you are still a business, and all that you produce, it could one day become evergreen for you. So just being mindful that you have to put these things in place, like after you've gotten your camera, after you've learned your skill, after you bought your software and all these things, that business is always going to be one of the things that may be a hurdle, but you have people around, whether it's us or somebody else, that will be able to help you put those things in order for yourself.
I just wanted to say something about the archive, because, we are talking about documenting a moment right here. And so the gatekeepers, photo editors, the curators, they have a huge amount of power in that, what is recorded and what's omitted from the history is going to be, it's already glaring, right? And so we're out here recording, documenting what we're doing and adding to the archive, but it's important to really think about having Black photographers be part of that conversation as we move forward, because like I said, when we look back at the works, what's being taught in art schools, what's being taught in the university, the syllabus is devoid of the work we have done, and that's partly because our work hasn't been incorporated and published and included in the publications and the museums and things like that. So it's very important, the power that the editors and the curators have.
All right, that was one question with a lot of great answers. Thanks for that, Andre. I think we're probably going to have time for maybe one more question. Kevin Mohat, if you're there, I've unmuted your mic. So go ahead and ask your question. I'm sorry, Kevin. Now you should be able to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So So I recently had the privilege of photographing a group of youth activists who staged. It was the most moving demonstration I had seen in the whole uprising, and it got a great reaction from most people. But then the trolls started coming out. A lot of the negative reactions started coming out. Then threats started happening, and recently somebody reached out to me personally on social saying they wanted to get their contact information because they wanted to be security for them. And obviously I did not share that information with this person, but I went and looked at their profile, and what I saw was pretty disturbing. The cover image was the back of a pickup with a bunch of guns in it. The videos were disturbing, lots of shooting. And so then my question is, can you just talk about what's our obligation to protect our subject? Because I worry about when is the reaction going to happen to this uprising, because I think it's just waiting in the shadows of white supremacists who are going to come out and retaliate. And I don't know how I would live with myself if somebody I photographed and somebody whose story I brought to light was then the victim of violence from a white supremacist because of my images. Like, so can you please talk about that?
Okay, so are you saying that how do you protect yourself when you're doing the story, or the subject of the photograph that is in? I just want to make sure I give you the right.
I think
the subjects of the photographs, the people in the images. So on the one hand, I'm like, great, we're highlighting this great work that these individuals are doing, but then what happens if what's my obligation to protect people? Like, how far do I go in sharing their story, and like, what's my obligation to make sure that they're not injured?
I mean, well, one, primarily you have to tell the story. Okay, so that's the first obligation. The second obligation is you have to have some sensitivity and be able to kind of read the moment. I mean, I always recommend the photographers. I mean, if there's a moment that happens, of course, you don't have time to do that because you want to react to the moment that's happening. But then I always encourage photographers to follow up and talk to the person, if you can, that you photographed, and say, hey, you mind if you can do it beforehand, great. But a lot of times, you don't want to disturb what's actually happened in front of you, but you have to kind of look and judge for yourself of where's the sensitivity here. I mean, photography, especially photojournalism, it's somewhat about a partnership. You're partnering with the subject. You're trying to become more in tune with the subject matter in terms of understanding it, and that kind of guides you in how you want to interpret what it is that you see. Sometimes you have sometimes you have some flexibility with that, where you have time to actually communicate with people, and a lot of times you're running and gunning in the moment. Getting names is always a good start. When you get names, then you've established a contact with the subject matter to say, hey, I have your photograph, I'd like to get your name. It's journalistic practice to get as many names as you possibly can. But if it's a powerful image that you feel makes a statement about what's going on around you and what you feel your interpretation should be, you make the image. I mean, the image is what's important, and you try to do the best that you can, sensitivity-wise. If you think it's a risky situation, you can always try a different angle. But there's some controls, but sometimes you're going to have more control over that than other times.
Yeah, I think you have to be very like purposeful and intentional when taking some of that. For me, my personal experience is a lot of the work that I've done, I've been able to get consent like that, whether it was if I was right there and I saw something, and wanted to take that portrait, or if I was at a distance and I made eye contact and, they just give the nod or something like that. you can kind of see that. For me, it's been a thing of those who really don't want to be seen in that, they usually like cover their face or like turn away or, you know, something like that. So in that instance, I'm not going to be, you know, chasing them around trying to get a picture of their face. Like that's not a story. That's sensationalizing it and looking for, you know, that dramatic award-winning photo with the purpose of that and not really telling the story of what's going on. Because my experience has been the people that I photograph, they want people to know their story because a lot of times they have been invisible. And I've had people to even ask me, take my picture. And I think it's different in that case because you do have, and I'll go back to the youth, a lot of the young leaders who are out there and they want their photo taken. Like they freely give me their name and their information and their contact, because they want people to know the work that they're doing. So I'm not doing anything to kind of violate, you know, any kind of trust or exposing anything, because the way, when I'm out there, the way I go at it is, what's the purpose? Like what is going on? Why are we marching today? What is this about? And then if I go in with that mindset, that drives how I operate, how I move, what I take pictures of. So then there's not that issue of, you know, I'm exposing something, you know, or trying to hone in on someone that doesn't want to be photographed.
And also not always having to gravitate to what would be seen as being sensational. There are some other intimate and quiet moments that aren't always in the front. You know, if you're in the midst of the crowd or in the back, and if you just take the time to just get the temperature of what's going on, you know, you don't always have to go for the huge part. As Layla was saying earlier, going for those quiet moments, seeking those stories that still have some type of connection to the bigger issue, but also being, you know, cognizant that there is normalcy within Black life. We go to the grocery store, we go wash our car, you know, those simple things. So having those stories in the back of your mind rather than looking for what everybody else is taking pictures of definitely matters in the structure of the stories that we tell.
Oh, Joe, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Oh my God.
Oh, nobody wanted to say anything because we were all kind of.
Oh my goodness, that was a rookie mistake on my 17th show. It was really good too, what I was saying. Thank you, everyone. I want to say thank you for taking the time to share a very important discussion. You know, thank you, Dudley, for leading that powerful hour and a half that we've just spent. Thank you to all the panelists for giving your time and for your passion and your artistry out there on the streets. And especially I want to note that Cherie and Michael, they're the ones that organized this panel. They invited everyone and did all the work. All I did was provide a platform today, and I'm honored and proud to have done that. And a video, we'll have a recording on our Facebook page. We'll post the video on our YouTube and on our website. So you'll be able to please share that for others and watch it again. I want to thank our sponsors. This is our second to last show, and it's been a great 3 months. I especially want to thank Fujifilm for all the support they've given us, Tamron as well, Multiple Exposures Gallery, Peak Design, Capital Photography Center, and KEH Camera. Thank you for making all these shows possible. Next week, Tuesday, is our last episode of our photo festival. And we're going to have a show on where we began, which was talking about hope and the power of photography to remind us about hope and what it looks like. And I hope you join us for that. That'll be a Tuesday. I'll be posting the link to that soon. Anybody want to have a last say? Anybody want to leave us with some thought?
Can we all just kind of leave a last?
Yeah, please do. Please do. I can make it easy for you. Cherie, you're first.
I guess because I volunteered it. I just want to, first of all, thank Joe and Focus on the Story for the platform to host this much needed, important conversation today. Thank you to all of my friends here, photographers and editors, for agreeing to join in and help make this conversation happen. And lastly, for everyone who joined in, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the support. And let's move this beyond this moment. And I'm probably hashing this again and again, but I just feel it's really important that all of this that you're feeling now, let's take this beyond now. And let's continue this beyond this moment, so that when all of your whatever anger, sadness, frustration, let's mobilize that to make real change. And any change is going to be uncomfortable. So if we truly want change, then we have to know that it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be hard conversations, and it's going to take looking in the mirror and even like looking at yourself and saying, well, maybe I've been doing it wrong. Maybe I haven't been looking at it right. And let's just be honest with each other and, move forward.
Layla?
Hi, thank you again for having me. I just want to say images are very important in the creation of the ideas and the beliefs that we have. When we're consuming images, read them very carefully. Know your history on photography. Know your history of Black photographers. Absolutely, most certainly know your history of Black women photographers. And yeah, just stay vigilant, y'all.
Brent?
Yeah, I just, at the end of the day, I hope we keep this industry going. I love it. I got into this industry on like a whim, on like a random, I guess, a gust of wind, basically. And I just fell in love with it. There's nothing more that I love in this life to be around than pictures. Like, I enjoy them. They show us our good moments, our bad moments, the happy ones, the sad ones. They capture our memories, and they mean something, and they have power in them. And I want that power to be more accessible. I want that power to be equitable, and I want other people to be able to have that and to create and craft the images of our history that we're going to look back in 50, 60, 70 years the way we do now, and we can see ourselves and we can see others. And not only that, but we can recognize ourselves. We can recognize the way that we live, because some of these photos you look back and now, is that how we lived? Is that really how it happened? You have to question that. And I want to be able to look back. I want my son to be able to look back and see images and be like, that's me. That's my people. That's what we look like. So thank you all again for having me. And just thank everyone for the work you're doing. And thank you for dropping by.
Thank you. Rashad? You're on mute.
Yes, hi. Yeah, thank you so much. This was great. Thanks for having me. A lot of good ideas shared. I hope that people listen. I think that, again, I'll just say it again, we've been making the work. We've been here. I want to say to any photo educators that are watching, put Black photographers in your syllabi, because, oh my God, they're always non-existent. I remember going through school And I had to do my own work to find out about Black photographers. And there's already, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 Black photo students in the program at a time. And so to go throughout grad school or undergrad and feel ignored definitely has impact on these Black photographers when they go out into the industry and then are ignored again by colleagues. So make that effort to change that. I should not be the only one putting Black photographers in my syllabi and then being called out and saying my syllabi is full of Black photographers and there's no diversity within it. So yeah, please make that effort. Please. Thanks.
Lindsey.
To echo what everyone else has said, thank you for having me and having us here today. My hope is that not only do we remain vigilant, but we remain purposeful and intentional with our work. The amount of work that's coming out now, aside from protests and stories that are connected to the protests, are just as impactful as any other story that we've ever told. And so being in this moment and knowing that we share the same space of, you know, Gordon Parks and Sharon Farmer and photographers with, you know, with names such as that, that the impact that we are providing is going to be just as effective for years to come. So I hope that as we progress in our knowledge of not only just not only Black photographers, but we also insert them into our memory bank, just as we remember all the other photographers before us.
Thank you. Dudley.
Think about the business. There are only so many outlets. So I always encourage, and I'm encouraging photographers now to build your own thing, you know, create websites, create collectives, create publications, do books, think about books, think about your book. Put the work out there. If there's not a way of how to get the work out there, then think about how to create one for that to happen. Think about the business of the industry and how it works. A lot of times we tend to just think about the photographs themselves and not think about the structure that makes this a huge industry. So think about those things. Thanks to Sharice and Mike for putting this together. It's been a pleasure meeting Layla and meeting Joshua and finally talking to Lindsey in person. And it's always good seeing Brent and Mike and Sheree too, because they're all around, see them. But that's it. Thanks for the opportunity, and it's been an honor having this conversation with you all.
And last but not least, Michael Mccoy, who first called me up with the idea to have this panel, and I appreciate that, Michael. Michael, take us home.
Thanks for putting this all together. Thanks for taking a chance on the project. I'm glad that we had this talk. I think it's been needed for a long time, and I hope that we can get some good results out of this and get some action. Because everyone always talks about diversity. Everyone acknowledges diversity, but it's all been talk. And I think it's about time for some action. And hopefully we can have a nice action plan, and then that we can start putting other photographers of color in the spaces where we normally aren't welcomed. And hopefully this right here can create some change for us and the future generations.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone that watched. Bye-bye.
Thanks to you too, Joe.
Thank you.